So I recently came across a really interesting article on the Moz blog called $1 Million Content. For those who don't know, Moz is a search marketing firm. They were previously known pretty much for SEO specifically, but as SEO has turned more towards content user experience, they've done a lot of research on content as well. So what they did for this post that was so interesting was they looked at pages they called $1 million pages. And $1 million page in organic search was basically a page that was ranking for a very high value keyword, and that it was ranking high enough that they could predict the click-through rate for those pages. And the keywords that they were ranking for had a high enough value, so they could determine that it was $1 million piece of content. And so what they were doing is looking for similarities between these pieces of content. And what they found I thought was pretty interesting. So the first thing they found is that the content was really on point. It really answered the questions extremely thoroughly. It wasn't always the longest content. It wasn't always the content that had the most links. It wasn't always the content that was the most flashy, but it really answered the question completely thoroughly that the person asked in the query. I thought the other interesting part was it wasn't just that they answered the question, there was no filler content. A lot of content in SEO plays these days is just about length and about as much content as possible. But it was really about just answering the question, not making people wade through a whole bunch of filler, just getting to the point. So the other interesting thing, similarly, they found is that a lot of the content was really bold. It really stood out from the rest of the content in the SERPs. And this often goes against conventional wisdom. So right now, page load speed is a really big thing in the SEO community. How fast can you get the page to load? It's a ranking factor, obviously, so people want to get it, their page load speed as low as possible. But in some instances, it's okay to buck that trend and actually to go for something big and bold and that really stands out and that's different from everything else that your competitors are showing. So I thought that was another interesting thing. The page load speed. And the third thing that they found was that $1 million content was fresh. It was constantly updated. So you can't just spend a lot of time on a piece of content, put it up there and expect it to rank forever. You really need to keep it fresh. You need to keep it updated. Google looks to see if your content is getting stale. If it is, they're going to devalue it. So that was another thing that they found for these $1 million content pieces. So I'm going to put this whole article up on Yammer so you guys can all check it out. But those were the sort of three main things I wanted to show you.